It always looks like they won at first, doesn't it? They walk away with a smirk, convinced they've outsmarted you, convinced they've escaped accountability, convinced that abandoning the very person who stood beside them somehow proves their power. Meanwhile, you're left with the ache, the confusion, the quiet shaking inside your chest as you try to understand how someone who said they cared could treat you like you were disposable. But what they never realized is that the moment they betrayed you, they didn't liberate themselves. They lit the fuse on their own psychological collapse. Carl Jung warned that what we bury in the unconscious does not disappear. It grows teeth. And when a narcissist betrays the one person who grounded their fragile self-structure, they unknowingly step into a slow-burning spiral that will eat away at their mask, their identity, and the hollow throne they built for themselves. The price of betrayal is never paid in public at first. It is paid quietly in the psyche, where denial turns into decay and power turns into paralysis. The betrayal never begins with courage. It begins with fear disguised as dominance. A narcissist betrays because intimacy threatens them. Real closeness demands vulnerability, responsibility, and self-awareness, qualities their inflated yet brittle ego cannot sustain. So they reach for chaos instead. They tell themselves they're choosing freedom, adventure, or emotional truth. In reality, they're trying to silence the noise inside their own head. They assume you will absorb the damage the way you always have. They assume your compassion will bend under the weight of their lies. They assume your love will serve as a safety net, ready to catch them whenever their impulses lose momentum. That is their first fatal miscalculation. Betrayal doesn't strengthen their sense of self, it fractures it. Jung observed that when someone acts in opposition to their own moral center, the psyche splits further apart. The narcissist already lives behind layers of false identity. The moment they betray you, that fracture widens, and they must spend enormous energy pretending nothing has broken. They don't recognize that the adrenaline they feel after betrayal isn't triumph. It's shock passing through a structure that cannot hold. What follows is not guilt, at least not at first, but restlessness. Their behavior becomes tense, erratic, oddly defensive over insignificant things. They criticize, nitpick, or provoke arguments as a way to displace what's happening internally. The betrayal has disrupted the fantasy they crafted about themselves, and the psyche cannot sustain the discrepancy. Jung explained that when a person refuses to reconcile their outer behavior with their inner truth, the shadow gains power. The narcissist's shadow is composed of everything they refuse to admit: insecurity, envy, shame, dependency. Betrayal feeds that shadow. It forces them to hide. It forces them to fabricate new stories. It forces them to rewrite your history together just to justify their actions. They cannot allow themselves to remember your patience or your loyalty, because acknowledging your value would require acknowledging what they destroyed. So they distort the story. They paint you as distant, cold, demanding, or flawed enough to deserve abandonment. This distortion drains them. It turns ordinary interaction into performance. They are no longer relating to you, they are rehearsing around you. The persona, the polished mask they present to the world, begins to tremble. In healthy people, the persona is flexible, merely a social interface. For the narcissist, it is their entire identity. There is no integrated self beneath it. Betrayal now forces that mask to carry an impossible weight. They must appear innocent while managing a lie that contradicts their image. This tension leaks out in strange ways. They may swing between charm and cruelty, confidence and hostility, grandiosity and despair. They begin to overcompensate, sudden affection, exaggerated gestures, dramatic speeches about loyalty and love. But these gestures feel hollow, artificial, strained, because they are not rooted in truth. They are attempts to reinforce a mask that is already splitting. Jung taught that the psyche seeks equilibrium, and when one pole is artificially inflated, the other crashes upward with equal force. Their shadow floods the surface. Irritability becomes paranoia. Control becomes obsession. Their superiority collapses into insecurity they cannot name. And then something happens they never anticipated. The supply they depended on, your emotional presence, your attention, your willingness to stay, begins to dry up. You stop pleading. You stop rescuing. You stop participating in the script. Your silence, your distance, your withdrawal of emotional investment strikes the core of their psychological system. For the narcissist, the self is not self-generated. It is borrowed from the people who reflect them. You were not just a partner, you were the stabilizing mirror through which they believed they existed. When you detach, whether through no contact, emotional disengagement, or quiet indifference, they feel it like a system failure. They can tolerate anger because anger still revolves around them. They can tolerate tears because tears still orbit their importance. But indifference is annihilation. It is the moment the ego deflates, when the internal scaffolding collapses because there is nothing left to lean against. They begin to panic, though they will never admit it. They search for reassurance from new sources, but nothing fits. No one else carries the history, patience, or emotional attunement you provided. New supply lacks resonance. They feel oddly unseen in the very fantasy they chased. As their internal world destabilizes, the shadow steps forward fully. Jung described psychological possession, a state in which a person becomes overtaken by the unconscious forces they refused to integrate. The narcissist in collapse is not composed or strategic anymore. Their rage becomes uncontrolled. Their moods swing violently. They lash out at the new partner, friends, family, co-workers, anyone who fails to restore the ego state they once held through you. They make reckless choices, burn bridges, sabotage opportunities, or spiral into impulsive excess. They are no longer performing confidence, they are scrambling to outrun the emptiness that betrayal forced them to face. Shame begins to bleed through the persona. Because they cannot consciously acknowledge wrongdoing, they distort reality further, casting themselves as the victim of circumstances, fate, or your unfair reaction. Yet the performance weakens. Their stories conflict. Their image deteriorates. The world they curated contracts. While this decay unfolds in their psyche, something entirely different unfolds in yours. The pain you felt was real, but it became a catalyst. You are forced to sit with grief, anger, disillusionment, and the shattering of illusion. You confront the truth of what the relationship was, and what it was never going to become. That confrontation is growth. Jung described individuation as the process of reclaiming the self from projections and illusions. You are doing that work. You are rebuilding boundaries. You are integrating lessons. You are relearning your own worth independent of their validation. The narcissist, by contrast, cannot do this. To change, they would have to dismantle the very ego structure that shields them from shame. And so they repeat instead of evolve. They wander through replacements and distractions, chasing the echo of a wholeness they only ever experienced through the stability you provided, stability they shattered themselves. Time does not heal the narcissist's wound, it deepens it. Their world grows smaller, colder, narrower. They become locked in repetition, acting out the same betrayals with new faces, never understanding why the outcome is always the same. They are haunted by the last authentic mirror they destroyed. They return to your memory not because of love, but because losing you revealed their internal vacancy. They mistook betrayal for power, only to discover it was abandonment of the self. They believed discarding you kept them in control, but in truth it removed the last anchor connecting them to psychological reality. What they thought was victory was the beginning of erosion. What they thought was independence was the start of exile. And that is why the story does not end with your destruction, it ends with your liberation. Betrayal did not ruin you. It revealed you. It exposed where you had minimized yourself to keep peace, where you had confused tolerance with love, where you had accepted chaos in place of reciprocity. You walked through fire and emerged with clarity. Your scars are not symbols of weakness, they are evidence of survival and awakening. Meanwhile, the narcissist remains trapped inside the very prison they built to avoid truth. They are left with the emptiness they projected onto you, the silence they once used as punishment now echoing back at them. They believed they discarded you, but in reality, you were released. They are the ones who remain frozen in the collapse they triggered, clinging to a mask that no longer protects them, haunted by a shadow they can no longer outrun. And while they sink deeper into the ruins of a life built on denial, you step forward, not broken, not defeated, but returned to yourself, finally free to build a life that does not require shrinking to be loved.